Hi, I'm Sarah, a grateful believer in recovery from codependency and workaholism. Thank you for taking the Celebrate Recovery sponsor training. I want to personally thank each of you for attending. I can see that you have the desire to help others by sharing your experience and victories. Before we actually talk much about how we help others, let's start with a quick overview of why we need accountability team and what that team is made of. First of all, there are 3 reasons that we need an accountability team. The first is simple. It's biblical. To summarize Ecclesiastes 4:9 through 12, 2 are better than 1, and a cord of 3 is not easily broken. 2, it's a key part of our recovery program. And 3, it is absolutely the best guard against relapse. We must establish and actually use our accountability team before we can be good sponsors. Our accountability teams should consist of a sponsor and multiple accountability partners. And this is also true for the people we sponsor. They need to have multiple accountability partners as well as us as their sponsor. Remember, a sponsor is like a personal trainer or a coach, whereas an accountability partner is someone we go to the gym with or a teammate. Also, it's important that each person understands they must take responsibility for their own recovery. One of the most important steps in beginning recovery is seeking new relationships. So we do not assign people to be part of anyone's accountability team. We also recommend against someone walking up to a newcomer, even if that newcomer has been coming for a month, they're still really a newcomer, and offering to be their sponsor. That could scare someone off, and it's healthier for everyone concerned if the sponsee asks the potential sponsor that relationship rather than the other way around. However, because accountability partners work together and typically around the same level, it's always okay to ask someone if they will be your accountability partner. That way, you're the one asking for help, not offering it. That is much less intimidating to the other person and healthy for your recovery. When someone asks you to be a sponsor, prayerfully consider it. It is an honor, but it also takes a lot of time and energy. We need to make sure we're not overcommitted, and we must maintain a healthy balance. We must still be able to make our own meetings and groups, take care of ourselves and our families. A good practice is to match sponsee time with meetings, meeting the sponsee before our meeting or after our meeting, or the fellowship time afterwards. This saves you time, it saves your sponsee time, and it also helps encourage attendance at the meetings. Now, let's go over the basic requirements for being a sponsor. You can look at this handout just called Sponsor Training, and it's on the very first page. Here are the prerequisites for being a sponsor. 1, we must have worked through the Celebrate Recovery participant guides, all 4 of them, at least one time. This includes completion of a thorough 4th and 5th step. We cannot guide where we have not been. Now, just in case you're not aware, the 4th step is writing your inventory, and the 5th step is sharing that inventory, typically with your sponsor. But if you don't have a sponsor when you are in the step study, you can share it with someone else. By the time you're sponsoring someone, you really need to have your own sponsor. Otherwise, you can get drained so quickly. Number 2, we must have at least one continuous year of sobriety or abstinence as appropriate in our primary area of recovery. This is because our own recovery must be on track before sponsoring others. Now, if you've been in recovery and discovered a new issue, you can still be a sponsor because it's your primary area. So that means that the second area is something you can work on, but you're probably strong enough with your tools that you can still sponsor someone else as you work on a new area. 3, we must be actively attending Celebrate Recovery meetings because our own recovery must be on track while we're sponsoring others. Also because it's so important to lead by example. And if you're not there, how do you know if your sponsee is or not? 4, we must have our own balanced accountability team, including a sponsor and multiple accountability partners. This is because we need support. We need to grow, and they're the ones that help us do that. We cannot lean on our sponsees for support. We need to get our support from our accountability team. 5, we must be the same gender as our sponsee. This keeps sponsorship safe, and it's also a good idea just because men and women have different communication styles. Before we go to the acrostic, I'd like to have some audience participation. I want people to share on the following question. What do you think are the qualities of a good sponsor? Please pause the video at this point and list the qualities that the participants share on a whiteboard or poster board for about 2 to 3 minutes. You can take longer if you want, but of course that will mean that the training takes longer. And now we're going to turn to the sponsor acrostic and talk about how Celebrate Recovery explains how to be an effective sponsor. The sponsor acrostic is as follows. The S is for set a good example. The P is for prayer. The O is for oneness with Christ. The N is never condemns. The S is shares our personal experiences. The O is open and honest communication. And the R is responsibility. Now, S is set a good example. The first fill-in in your handout is qualities and characteristics. That's qualities and characteristics. When someone asks us to be a sponsor, it's usually because they want what we have. They have identified with something we have shared in a meeting or when we gave our testimony or at step study. We are displaying qualities and characteristics they strive to have, such as honesty, integrity, willingness, and compassion. We highly recommend that you talk to your own sponsor before agreeing to become a sponsor so that you can be sure your recovery is strong enough to help you guide someone else in their recovery. If you accept the responsibility of being a sponsor, remember, God is using this opportunity to encourage and guide another person on the right path to recovery and sobriety. Do not take it lightly. We will need to continue to demonstrate those qualities and characteristics that drew the sponsee to us in the first place if we want to be the kind of sponsor they are looking for. 2, my experience. We all want to be a good example to the people we're sponsoring. So it is vital that we keep our own lives in order. We will make mistakes. but how we handle those mistakes will speak volumes about our spiritual maturity. As mature, recovering individuals, we know that freedom comes from continually working the principles and working on our own recovery. To be effective and godly sponsors, we must continue to have the experience of working the steps and principles, as well as seeking a greater knowledge of God in our lives. This will also be a good example to our sponsees. 3, we must have a willingness to be vulnerable. We should lead with our weaknesses as opposed to our strengths. While the sponsee may be glad to see that we have overcome the weaknesses, it is those weaknesses and their similarities to them that drew them to ask us to be their sponsor. We must be open to sharing our embarrassing moments and uncomfortable experiences with those we sponsor, to connect with them, encourage them, and build trust. They need to know that they are not unique, that we have been where they are or have been. Titus 1:9 says, "He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it." Take 2 or 3 minutes to list 3 areas where you are setting a good example in your own recovery, and 1 area you will target for continued growth. We're going to pick right up where we left off, and that's with the next letter on our acrostic. P is for prayer. And first, we're going to get your input again. Why do you think prayer is important as a sponsor? Please pause the video now and take 2 to 3 minutes to discuss this with your group, and probably write down on your whiteboard or blackboard or poster board what your answers are, so that every time you meet, whether on the phone or in person, begin your time together with prayer. You should open in prayer and then encourage your sponsee to pray as well. The first time or 2 that we work with the sponsee, we may have to teach them how to pray. And that is an amazing thing to do. But it's not hard. It's so simple, because prayer is so simple. You just remind your sponsee that prayer is talking to God. If they can talk to you, they can pray. When we meet, whether in person or on the phone, we should specifically pray for the strength needed to guide the sponsee and for insight to make the right suggestions during that meeting. We also pray for anything specific we know the sponsee is currently struggling with or needs prayer for. But when we meet isn't the only time we should pray for our sponsee. It's best to pray for every sponsee you have daily. Here are 3 ways we can pray for our sponsees. Number 1, healing. Pray for the physical, emotional, and spiritual healing of our sponsees. Remember, they have similar hurts and habits and pasts like ours, riddled with various abuses and traumas. They need Jesus Christ's healing grace. 2, lifting of denial. Pray the fog of denial lifts. As recovering people, we all know how hard it is to break through. Don't deny it. If you know someone who thinks they're not in denial, they're in denial about being in denial. As a sponsor, we are privileged to be in a position to make suggestions and point out when denial is the main coping mechanism. We must pray that their eyes stay open and their hearts soft for the Holy Spirit to show them where they're in denial. Pray for your sponsees to be broken so that the Lord can put them back together His way. 3, protection. We must pray for the protection of our sponsees. They will have times of trial and temptation. We are all tempted on a daily, sometimes hourly basis. The newcomer is an especially easy target for the enemy. We must continually pray for the men and women God has so graciously provided us with the opportunity to lead and encourage. Sometimes we are their main or only source of prayer. The rest of their family may be unsupportive or non-existent, and they may not yet be ready to be in church. We encourage them to be, but we don't push, as we'll discuss later in the training. Listen closely while I read this verse. Continue earnestly in prayer, being vigilant in it with thanksgiving. Meanwhile, praying for us also, that God would open to us a door for the word to speak the mystery of Christ, for which I am also in chains. That's Colossians 4, verses 2 and 3. I'd like you to pause the video and pair up with someone at your table and take the next 3 or so minutes to pray for your current and future sponsees. Pray that God will provide you the insight and ability to support them. The next letter in our acrostic is O. Oneness with Christ. Oneness with Christ is another way to say spending time with Christ and growing in Him. So why do you think oneness with Christ is important as a sponsor? Pause the video now to list why oneness with Christ is important as a sponsor on your whiteboard or poster board for about 2 or 3 minutes. Go longer if you want, of course, but that will make the training take a little longer. Here are some ways we can keep growing in Christ. 1, daily prayer and meditation. Keep moving along your spiritual path as I keep moving along mine. Taking on a sponsee is a rewarding but challenging endeavor. Our daily prayer and meditation will be a resource for us to draw strength from, so we are better able to give wise counsel. The stronger our bonds to Christ, the more peace, joy, and wisdom we will have to share. 2, ongoing accountability. As sponsors, we also need to have our own accountability team, a sponsor and multiple accountability partners in our area of recovery. We need them for support and to point out when we are headed in the wrong direction, facing denial again, or need to make a few adjustments to our program. We all need an accountability team. Earlier, I summarized Ecclesiastes 4:9 through 12, but now I'm going to share the whole thing with you. 2 are better off than 1 because they can work more effectively. If one of them falls down, the other can help him up. But if someone is alone, there is no one to help him. 2 people can resist an attack that would defeat 1 person alone, and a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. 3, attending recovery meetings. We are all in a recovery process until Jesus returns. So meetings need to be a priority for us all. God intends that we stay on this path until the end of our days. To keep our recovery on track, we must continue to go to meetings, especially when we are hurting, when we would rather isolate ourselves, and during difficult times. Try to think of it as an insurance premium on your recovery. If we are up to date, we will most likely be spiritually, mentally, and emotionally covered when challenges surface. 4. Practicing the 8 recovery principles. We are always striving to be above reproach and to flee from sin, but we are not perfect. We will make mistakes. Our lives must reflect the sincerity of a heart that continues to move forward, following Jesus' examples for living. We will all stumble, but we must remember to pick up and continue on the path God has set before us. We also must be willing to follow our own suggestions, especially if we expect someone else to follow them. Just because you make a mistake does not make you a hypocrite. It makes you human. What makes you a hypocrite is if you intentionally say one thing and do another. 5. Being in a small group. One of the greatest ways to build close relationships and an accountability or support team is to be in a small group. Now, I'm talking about the small groups at Celebrate Recovery, such as the open share groups and step studies, but also other small groups. You should be involved in a small group at church or with other believers in a Bible study, or somewhere where you can make sure that you are connecting with people, not just at church in a general way, not just listening to the sermon, but real connections with other believers. This is where we find fellowship, share in the joy and gift of God's grace, and in our recoveries. A small group provides community, fellowship, joy, and accountability. As Hebrews 4:15 and 16 says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." The next letter in our acrostic is N. N is for never condemns. Let's talk about why it's important not to condemn someone you are sponsoring, or anyone really for that matter. Pause the video now to list why it's important not to condemn people. You'll write those on the whiteboard or poster board for 3 minutes. Okay, here's what CR says about not condemning. 1. Be a good listener. We are asked to sponsor because we are viewed as trustworthy and safe. Most newcomers have never shared parts of their story with anyone because of the profound fear and shame about their circumstances or actions. This fear and shame has brought them into recovery. We may be the first person they have ever really trusted. We will have the incredible gift of hearing their deepest, darkest fears. They will need desperately to trust us with how they were hurt and who they have wronged. Many of these hurts are shared in meetings, but the deepest wounds are often shared only with us, the sponsor. 2, we need to respond with sensitivity. Absolutely. The first words out of your mouth must be positive. Your words should not be negative. Even when you need to correct, which as a sponsor you may need to do from time to time, you should do it from a positive perspective rather than a negative one. Imagine how damaging it would be to the ears of someone who just confessed a deep, dark secret to hear, "Are you kidding me? What, are you nuts? That's insane. I can't believe you did that. How could anyone do such a thing?" That sense of shame they've always had would multiply and leave them feeling betrayed and maybe even scared of recovery in general. We must listen without judgment, remembering that we too have done such things and that God sees all sin equally. If you have an involuntary reaction, because sometimes I do, such as, "Wow," or "Really?" follow it up immediately with a positive comment or how you relate. "Wow." Now can become, "Wow, I had a similar experience. I'd love to hear more." If you do share a similar experience, keep this brief. Remember, it's about them, not you. "Really?" can become, "Really? I would have never guessed because you've already grown so much." If you find during open share, step study, or just in general conversation that you respond with exclamations or negative expressions like, sorry, probably not that last one, it may not be a good time for you to be a sponsor yet. We need to be able to control our reactions in order to respond with sensitivity. 3, we need to prayerfully consider feedback. Take time responding to issues when necessary. Do not expect that a fountain of wisdom and knowledge will be ready to pour out of our mouths at a moment's notice just because we're suddenly a sponsor. We need to give ourselves time. It's okay to let our sponsees know that we want time out to pray about the situation they are seeking guidance on. This is especially important when they are going through something we have not personally been through. You can seek wise counsel from God's word always. And your sponsor or pastor, if you have permission to talk to them from your sponsee. Unless we have specific permission from our sponsee, it is not acceptable to share what they have said or even their general circumstances to get advice. And even with permission to talk to someone, we shouldn't talk to anyone except our pastor or sponsor about that situation. While we might think talking to an accountability partner or our open share group leader is just about getting godly advice, because that's where we'd get godly advice for ourselves, it's not your story. So you need to respect your sponsee's privacy and confidentiality and not say anything to them. Romans 8:1-2 says, "Therefore, there is now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Jesus Christ has made me free from the law of sin and death. It's time to pause the video again. You're going to take the next couple of minutes to list 3 ways or reasons you are already a safe person, and 1 area you will target for continued growth. We're ready to dive into the second S of sponsor, and that's share our personal experiences. Can anyone share with me how hearing another person's experience has helped you? You'll pause the video now to write how hearing others' experiences has helped people in this training and put it on your whiteboard or poster board. It's important to share our experience because it continues my personal healing. This is the time when the Lord will take our trials and difficulties in life and use them to give hope to our sponsees. We are called to use our experiences to benefit others. There is tremendous continued healing for the sponsor as well. Our recovery process will deepen and our blessings will multiply as the Lord works through the act of sharing our experiences with another person. God has promised He will never waste a hurt. 2, offers hope. The message in our experience is hope. There are many stories and little miracles that have happened in our lives that we've forgotten. They will come to mind as our sponsee shares their struggles with us. As we open up about how God has brought healing and light to our dark places, our sponsees will begin to understand that it can happen for them too. And remembering those miracles will encourage us in our continued recovery as well. 3, demonstrates freedom. When sponsees share their deepest, darkest secrets with us, and then we share similar ones with them, watch their face light up. Most of these men or women have never allowed themselves to share or find similarities with others before. They believe their struggles are unique. Anyone in recovery for any real length of time knows that there is nothing new under the sun. If we didn't do it personally, we know someone close to us who has. So be generous with your life experience. Here's our chance to be used by the Lord to better someone else. They will see hope for a changed life as they do the footwork and let God do His work in them. A word of caution on sharing. We need to be mindful not to use this relationship as a place to air our own grievances or dump. We should take our grievances to our sponsor and accountability partners. Our sponsees are not equipped or expected to handle our issues. We must focus more on encouraging and guiding them. Isaiah 61, 1-2 says, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, and the day of vengeance to our God, to comfort all who mourn." Isaiah 61, 1-2. Let's take a few minutes to list 3 hope-filled experiences or miracles that you can share with someone in recovery and encourage them. Pause the video now to do so. The next letter in our acrostic is O. Open and honest communication. Let's discuss, what does open and honest communication mean to you? By now you can guess. We're going to pause the video and take a few minutes for you to write down what your group shares. Ways we can be open and honest are: 1, be compassionate. Have compassion for others. More than anything else, our sponsees need to know we care for them and are praying for them, and that they are understood. We need to be careful not to try to fix them. The Lord will heal them in His time. We offer healthy suggestions and alternatives to keep them on the path. That's what they hired us for. And we share the hope that a life of theirs can be changed, just as ours have been. 2, listen. Most of our role is listening. Surprisingly, most people get to the bottom of their issues eventually when they talk about them. Even if they seem to say the same thing multiple times, let them keep talking. This is a common way for people to figure out how to handle things on their own. Also, often people just need an opportunity to vent. If we offer a suggestion when they're venting, it may actually discourage their trust in us. If suggestions are asked for, or we feel it's absolutely necessary to share a suggestion, we must carefully consider the situation fully before offering the suggestion. And remember, it's always okay to say, I need to think and pray before commenting or offering a suggestion. 3, confront denial and procrastination. We must be strong enough in our Christian walks and personal recovery to point out lovingly the damaging patterns of behavior in our sponsees. This could literally save their lives. And it's a great act of love and kindness, even though it doesn't always feel that way to them or to us. Confronting denial or procrastination is difficult to do when our relationships become unhealthy or too dependent. Confronting denial and procrastination is necessary for both the sponsor and the sponsee's recovery. The teaching of the wise is the fountain of life. Turning a man from the snares of death is the way that Proverbs 13:14 puts it. You're going to pause the video and take the next few minutes to list 3 ways that you are an open and honest communicator today, and 1 area you will target for continued growth. The last letter in our acrostic is R. The question is, what do you think a sponsor is actually responsible for? I'll give you 1 hint. It is not their sponsee's recovery. It is about helping them. Take 2 or 3 minutes to pause the video so that you guys can discuss what you think sponsors' responsibilities are. Write them down on your whiteboard, poster board, whatever. The ways we can be responsible. 1, being available. Committing to be a sponsor means we will be available for routine meetings or phone calls and for special circumstances, such as a potential relapse. It is important for us to set the tone of our relationship and verbalize the expectation of regular meetings. Our sponsees need stability and a chance to bond with us. We must counsel them and tell them the best time for them to call us is before they act out. We can offer little or no assistance after they've acted out. A common way people say this is, if you want to take a drink, call me first. After we talk, if you still want to take a drink, then go ahead. Of course, nobody's ever wanted to take a drink after they've talked to their sponsor, because the sponsor keeps talking to them until they don't want to take that drink. So don't make it sound, so it's not like we don't care. It's that we care so much, we don't stop until we help. Unless the person is really far gone. But normally, they don't bother to call us if that's where they're at. We also need to be available to take or at least return calls. We also need to have time set aside every week to meet with our sponsee, whether in person or on the phone. It doesn't have to be the same time every week, but it should be weekly. However, it is not our responsibility to call our sponsee. It is the sole primary responsibility of the person wanting to recover to reach out and ask for help of their sponsor, accountability team, or others. It is unwise for the sponsor to be the one calling to try to make the sponsee recover, or rescue them, or fix them. Remember, we do not need to work harder at our sponsee's recovery than they are. We cannot do this for them. Wanting to be rescued may be an old pattern of behavior for them, and trying to rescue may be an old pattern of behavior for you. We need to highly encourage our sponsees to reach out and develop strong accountability teams and not use us alone for their support. Someday we won't be available because we still have lives outside of being a sponsor. It's part of their recovery process to reach out and be vulnerable with other people as well. Remember, our sponsees must take full responsibility for their own recovery. It is unhealthy and unwise to have just one person to call in the time of crisis. If our sponsees tell us they acted out because we weren't around to stop or help them, it's absolutely not true. They should be calling other recovering people for support and prayer. It's not our fault when a sponsee acts out. It is their choice. They did not have to do it. Number 2, we must have boundaries. As sponsors, we must remember that we are not mother, father, spouse, or best friend. We must be cautious and stick to giving only objective suggestions and guidance, not falling into an unhealthy or codependent relationship. We, as the wiser recovering people in the relationship, must be on the lookout for signs that the relationship is becoming unhealthy. One of the non-Celebrate Recovery handouts explains some of these. This may include unexplained feelings of anger or disappointment. It may mean that people feel off when there are unmet expectations on either side. Perhaps you, as the sponsor, have become uncomfortable and feel put in the parent role. I have also seen circumstances where the sponsee is emotionally abusive to the sponsor. This is never acceptable, and it is okay for you to terminate the relationship if this occurs. If there is any doubt about boundaries, be sure to seek counsel from your sponsor or pastor or other spiritual leader. But remember to keep this part about you. It's about your boundaries, not about the sponsee. We also must be careful not to get too enmeshed in our sponsees' lives. We must keep a safe, healthy distance so we can remain objective if a relapse should occur. One of the greatest dangers for a sponsor is getting too close too fast and wanting to stop the sponsee's pain. Trials are essential for growth. Be patient. God is working on them. Included in your handouts is a sample sponsor agreement. This can help set expectations and boundaries clearly from the start of a sponsor's commitment. Both the sponsor and the sponsee should agree to anything that's written on it and keep a copy of this contract. Also in the paperwork is an accountability worksheet. This is something you can work through with your sponsee during one of your early meetings so that you can help set expectations and have a plan on how to deal with things if struggles occur. 3. We must protect anonymity and confidentiality. We must always preserve the anonymity and confidentiality of our relationship. Imagine what would happen to your sponsee if they were just being able to be open and vulnerable, and then they hear someone else discussing something that they shared in confidence with you. It would do irreparable damage, probably not just to their relationship with you, but to their recovery as a whole. They may even be unable to trust another person in the future to be their sponsor if you break their trust in this way. You must be extra careful to never break anonymity. Never, ever use names or specifics. Depending on the sponsee, they may take any sharing, even general, non-specific, as breaking their anonymity or confidentiality. I once had to make amends for breaking confidentiality because I asked another person in recovery the following question. Someone in our group came and asked a question about their marriage. Should I answer since I'm single, or should I suggest they talk to someone else? Now, I didn't think there was anything specific in that. There were multiple people in our group that were married, and there was no reason for anyone to associate a specific person with that question. However, I had actually gone back to them and said, hey, I wasn't sure if I should answer since I wasn't married. So I asked someone, and they said it was okay if I had some insight into it. The person was upset that I had said something because they felt that I had betrayed their confidentiality by mentioning that someone in the group had problems in their marriage. The same way, sharing a prayer request can be breaking anonymity and confidentiality unless you have specific permission from the person to share it. And they must give you details on how much you are allowed to share. Some people may be okay if you share the situation without a name. Some people may want you to simply share that there is an unspoken request. Some people may be willing for you to share everything. But just because you'd be okay with everyone knowing something about, for example, a health issue, doesn't mean they are. So always ask. The only time it's okay to break anonymity and confidentiality is if someone is threatening to injure themselves or others. If someone speaks of suicide, there's a suicide prevention plan in the information that you can go through, but you are permitted to talk to two people. One, your pastor. Two, your ministry leader. That's it. No one else. Do not speak to your sponsor unless they happen to be the ministry leader. Do not speak to your open share group leader. Do not speak to your accountability partners. Do not speak to your step study leaders about this. They have no recourse to help, and therefore sharing it is just gossip and doesn't help. Speak only to your pastor or ministry leader about threats of suicide or harming someone else. If you are not sure if it is risen to this level, speak to your pastor or ministry leader without using names and say, this is the type of thing I've heard. Do I need to tell you who? Then they can tell you if you break the anonymity. 4, we need to offer suggestions, not demands. Sponsorship is a voluntary position, and it's not a do as I say, not as I do arrangement. Many of us had those types of arrangements in our family of origin. We offer suggestions as sponsors based on our own recovering experiences and God's will for our lives. It is the sponsee's choice to change their behavior. Our sponsees do not need to take direction every time. They may be a little rebellious or not quite ready to comply. Whatever the situation, all we can do is offer them healthy choices based on our own recovery experience. Usually, we have a good idea of what's going to work for them. We were there too, and it worked for us. But don't get too discouraged or angry if they choose to do the opposite of what you suggest. They will face consequences just like we did. However, if our sponsees rarely or never follow our suggestions, this must be addressed. They hired us for a specific purpose, to offer guidance on their road to recovery. If they are not willing to take direction, then perhaps they are not ready to work a serious program. We must confront them in love on this issue. They may either recommit to taking our suggestions, or we may get the sense that it's time to release them from being our sponsees and release ourselves from the responsibility of being a sponsor to that person. 5, and the happiest thing of all, is that we get to rejoice in victories. We are so amazingly blessed when we see the recovery in the lives of those around us. One of the most incredible experiences of our recovery will be the miracles God performs in the lives of those we sponsor. We have the opportunity to be a vessel through which God's love, forgiveness, and healing power can be demonstrated. This impact on another human being is for their whole life. We will be amazed day after day. The newcomer who walked into these rooms, tired, hopeless, and defeated, will be filled with a new zest for life and hope for the future. There is no more darkness. It is absolutely vital that we celebrate victories. no matter how small or insignificant they seem. We must encourage them and praise them for reaching for their phone instead of their addiction, for keeping harsh words to themselves while in a conflict, rather than saying them out loud. We hope that someday the thoughts won't even come, but the fact that they hold back the words is amazing growth. We must celebrate every small step, and they will eventually turn into long strides. Some suggestions for rejoicing could be giving them an encouraging card or voicemail. Maybe a small gift like a journal or a special recovery coin or a flower. Even just a hug or some laughter or tears together, going out for coffee, are great. We as sponsors have a great impact on the lives of others. We must use our positions wisely and under the Lord's supreme counsel. So enjoy this journey. Don't forget to make a big deal out of both small steps and significant milestones. They are all true miracles. He who walks with the wise grows wise, but the companion of fools suffers harm, according to Proverbs 13:20. Pause the video and take the next few minutes to list a couple of ways that you are taking responsibility in your recovery, and one area for continued growth. Remember, service is a part of recovery. It is something we talk about and encourage all the time, from a newcomer's first meeting to the end of our step studies. As you are sponsoring someone, encourage them to give back and get into a place of service. If you find they have a talent or desire to serve in a way you don't currently have available, talk about it and see if it's something you can start. God will grow your ministry in ways you haven't even dreamed of. You should be always open to new ideas. However, you may not be able to do them all, but you should remain open to hearing about them. This is the end of our video. However, we recommend that as a group, you go through the remainder of the handouts, at least the frequently asked questions, the sponsor agreement, and the Celebrate Recovery Accountability Plan worksheet. And also, make sure to open it up for people to ask questions and get answers. Thank you for being part of this training and for allowing me to share a video with you. Goodbye.